Hey grade 8s, today we're going to talk about a guy named Archimedes. He was a Greek mathematician who lived from, by estimate, 287 to 212 BC. So about 2,300 years ago, 2,200 years ago. He's a mathematician. There's some discoveries he made about math that are still talked about today, and scientific discoveries that we'll talk about today as well. So there's kind of a legend around him, talking about how 2,300 years ago, approximately, the king of Syracuse, which it was a city on the island of Sicily. So if this is Italy, there's this little island down here called Sicily, and the king there, he hired this scientist to figure something out for him. Some guy was supposed to make a gold crown for the king. He was supposed to make a gold crown. So he was supposed to make a gold crown. But for whatever reason, the king thought that perhaps this crown was actually not purely gold, but it was an alloy melted of gold and silver. And they take those things, they'd melt them and make it into a crown. So it wasn't just one thing. And so he asked Archimedes, this mathematician, scientist, to figure it out for him. So Archimedes, he decides to figure this out, and he goes home, and thinking about it, after a while, he decides to have his evening bath. So he pours his bath all the way up to the brim, and as he's getting into his bath, he notices water pours over the sides. He notices that water pours over the sides. Have you guys ever noticed this before, that when something's full and you try to put something else into it, it overflows? Well, immediately he had an idea. And the legend, the story goes that he, without thinking, shouts the word Eureka, which is ancient Greek for I've got it, and got out of the bathtub and actually ran down the streets naked. Now, this is a legend. I don't know if it actually happened. There's some debate about whether it happened, but that story, I'm pretty sure, will help you remember about this principle. He realized that his body displaced the water. He realized that his body's volume was the same volume, the same space, the same amount of space taken up as the water that overflowed. So that water that poured out was the same as the volume of his body that went into the tub. So this would help him determine what that golden crown was made of. So I'm just going to show you some things here. I have two metals here. One's golden, one's silverish in color. Neither of them are gold or silver, but this will illustrate a point. You'll notice that they have the same diameter at the top, but you'll notice that the silver one is much taller. Okay? And if I weigh these, the silver one is 18 grams, and I believe this was 45. So the smaller one actually had a greater mass, and the lighter one had a lesser mass. The bigger one had a lesser mass. So that would tell you that this one's a whole lot denser. And just feeling them in my hands, this one I almost don't even feel it in my hand, and whereas this one, it feels pretty heavy. So this one's denser. So let's pretend that this is gold and this is silver. What's true about gold is a denser metal than silver. So if that crown was actually made out of gold, it would be heavier than if it was made out of gold and silver. However, it's tricky to just compare masses because we know that gold, it depends on the amount of gold. Obviously, one that has less gold will be lighter, and more gold will be more. The other problem is, a crown. Yes, please make fun of my drawings. That's why I keep drawing, because I got to get better. A crown doesn't have nice edges. There's no easy way for them to figure out the volume of it, right? Like a cube, you guys are able to calculate. You go height times width times length, right? And that would give you your volume. For a cube, it's pretty easy. to calculate it. But when there's all these different little edges, it's really hard to figure out the volume. But what he discovered was his body's volume was the same as the water that overflowed. So guess what he did? He went and got that crown, and he put it into the water and saw how much went over the edge. He weighed the mass of it, and he was able to calculate the density. Then he was able to take another piece of gold. He was able to dunk it in the water, figure out the volume that it displaced, and then he was able to figure out, by weighing the mass of that, the density, and he compared the densities. And the legend goes that he actually not only discovered that the crown was not made of pure gold, that it did have some silver in it, he figured out this idea of density that we're talking about. Our last activity talked about how mass, you get the mass of an object, you weigh it on a scale, and you divide it by the space it takes up, that volume, and you will get the density. Okay, the mass volume ratio is density. He was able to figure out that a bunch of different gold objects were the same density, so if that crown was actually made out of gold, it would have to have the same density, but it didn't.